Right now, there's a booming business in the area of what people will call data preparation, okay? And data preparation has a problem as a name because the prefix of preparation is itself pre, which means it's something you do before you do data analysis, okay? And there is absolutely a place for that. It's called ETL. And we can make better self-service ETL. We can make ETL better and more self-service. We can absolutely do that, and that's good, right? But our hypothesis is that that very often it's only the person who has the domain knowledge and the friendliness with the data who's going to spot those pernicious things that are wrong with it, or opportunities to add new capabilities, or opportunities to combine categories, or whatever it is that needs to be done. So data preparation happens before the analysis. Data wrangling happens during the analysis. Immediately upon seeing some issue, you fix it, right? And then also the hypothesis here is if you're going to do it before, that means you need to know what the problem is that you're fixing before you need to, be clairvoyant about what's wrong with the data so that you can build that into the workflow. And then, so data wrangling is on the other end of that spectrum, modifying it as you go. And today, pardon me for being blunt, but largely because the market leaders are so poor at data manipulation, a huge market has been built up around self-service data preparation tool as a sidecar. There's a bunch of different companies, a lot of VC money, excellent technologies coming into the marketplace, but unfortunately it's a separate tool. And so that has all of the complexities of learning two different ones, supporting two different ones, and maybe most obviously buying two different tools. And that creates disconnects and opportunities for errors. So another reason why putting those pieces together makes sense. Now then,
Brad,
yes, sir.
I think a quick point here is that what I see in the industry is that essentially we've been doing data wrangling for decades, and it's called Excel.
Absolutely.
Okay, so
Absolutely.
You might have a new gen of Excel, and then once we figure out what's happening there, then we do it properly, and we back up and redo everything in an ETL data preparation.
Right.
So I would be listening if I was an IT executive. Okay, how can I do this once? And
I'm going to talk about that as well.
And do it with insights and do it properly.
Absolutely. And I don't want to put the answer in the envelope quite yet, but I do want to say that properly doesn't equal separate, disconnected, hard to use, right? So I'm with you on the concept, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as we go. So then, if you think about the asset, if you will, the thing that does the preparation or the wrangling, right? The workflow, if you will. If you have two different tools, you have two different assets. So you have the preparation sitting over here in a recipe of some kind, and then you have the data output, and then you have the analytics that depend on it. And because they are separate from one another, there's other opportunities for disconnect. And the final piece here is, oftentimes if you're picking a separate tool or if you're doing data preparation, there are at least two distinct styles of data preparation that I'm going to talk about next.
You don't have data integration up there. You sort of do when you talk about the two tools that data prep is now encroaching into the proper formal data integration world. But data integration is different from data prep in that sense. Or I look at it almost as ETL light.
Right. We're kind of combining those concepts. So we do also, at least in our definition, we include data integration under the kind of data preparation and wrangling umbrella. Yeah, I think there are some places where there are clear demarcations. For example, is a postal code deliverable? Right? There's some high value knowledge that comes from some other system and that really typically runs in a process that doesn't really have too much to do with data wrangling per se. You might discover that this zip code only has 4 characters and there's a problem with it, but you're not going to fix that right in the data wrangling experience. So there is definitely some transactions that really exclusively belong outside, but that list is not super long. So we'd like to start to bring in more and more of that. And why should the developers, the data engineers, if you will, have kind of old school, non-experiential technologies to help them do their work? So I think you'll get the picture when we get to the demonstration. I'm throwing words at you right now, and I can see the look of I'm not sure. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt.
I'm
so we'll get
suspending
there.
disbelief.
There you go.
Here's my problem with what you've got. If I just looked at data wrangling, it would sound like all I needed was one tool, when in fact, I do still need ETL, I do still need data quality
Absolutely.
processing, and maybe even data prep to a certain extent. I think it's a little misleading, and it's a marketing slide, I get it.
And I'm not saying you don't need, there's nothing here that says you don't need. It's just the purpose of this slide is to try to...
You only need one tool.
Well, we're trying to distinguish between self-service data prep, what people typically associate with that, and a data wrangling approach, which is a more kind of inline behavior. And I absolutely submit, that there are jobs for ETL and data integration that are typically done outside of the analytic environment.
All right, just a comment.
So among the self-service data prep tools, there are more or less two styles. On the left-hand side, you can see the interactive styles, fantastic companies out there doing this, where you're looking at the data to identify quality problems and fixing it right there. I like those guys better because that's the way we look at things as well. But on the right side, we have the more workflow-oriented technologies, kind of classic boxes, connected by lines and creating a pipeline by which you cleanse the data, transform it, and so on and so forth. So I already told you my bias. I like the idea that only after looking at the data, in many cases, can you identify what's wrong or what you need to change or what you need to add. However, the workflow has the value of being more or less self-documenting. It's easy to look at it and say, oh, I can see what you did there, or I remember now what I did there. And it provides some level of traceability and security. It can serve as an asset that you can use going forward about what has been happening with your data, and it's quite valuable. So our hypothesis here is that we should do both of those things simultaneously, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Okay, inline data wrangling. We will automatically profile the data when you bring it in. We provision you with descriptive stats in a highly visual environment. I think the question was asked about that. Visual grouping, smart splitting, non-destructive type changes, unpivot, pivot on the fly with visual indications so that you can tell if it was right or if it wasn't right, which is often kind of a pernicious problem with workflow systems. Smart autocomplete, syntax highlighting, and self-documentation. And then, here's the cool part, right? After you've wrangled the data a little bit, we will automatically create a workflow for you. We're going to record the transactions that you went through, organize them in a reusable fashion that you can reuse in the context of this application, or promote to a more fully featured pipeline and run it in an automated basis to then run all those same transactions again remotely.
Just a quick clarification, when you say we will, you mean that the product will do this? It's not a separate service.
That's correct. The product does this. That's just how the product works.
And that's because you store it in memory and you have to keep doing it every time you run this query or this set
that's a good point. So today, most of the data wrangling, data preparation capabilities are in memory, but as you'll see in the roadmap section, obviously we want to be able to issue those kinds of quality commands back down to the system. And we can actually do that as well via our tear engine, which Michael will talk about, but it's not quite as easy as we'd like it to be. We'd like that to be invisible. Whether you're looking at data in memory, out of memory, you should not be able to tell the difference between those things.
It would be, yes, I agree. It would be nice if this is really convoluted, if they could do it once, store the data, and then use that.
Right. Now, I will make the caveat now, though, that the Spotfire in-memory data engine is on its 4th or 5th, depending on how you count, generation. And we have many customers who actually use the Spotfire application itself as a data mart. You can put hundreds and hundreds of millions of rows, not cached. I mean, you can cache it, or you can keep it live in memory, and you can bring it in and out of memory automatically on a schedule with response to events. So people will use, because this area is, naturally we're keeping this data for the purpose of analysis.
Right.
Why keep a separate mart together when actually we can hold gigabytes of data right there in memory or cached?
Please store this or keep it in memory.
All you do is hit save and you're done, right? And if you promote it to a shared area, now everyone in the company has access to that dashboard, and we can refresh it on a schedule or in response response to an event, and we take advantage of all those capabilities, with respect to how we connect with streaming. So the pieces all fit together in a kind of a nice way, and I realize the story is kind of evolving, and you want to get to the next place, so let's do it, right? So we automatically create this reusable self-documenting workflow, and we do recommendation-driven data wrangling as well. Now, this is another area of intense investment and work for us. We've got some of that already in the box, and we want more. So you'll see in the NDA section some of our plans around that going forward. And we also have, now this is via an OEM of a technology called Tibco. We have a tight connection with the Tibco semantic data catalog so that you can browse your data lake, manage your data lake, do in-lake analytics, or extract the data back out into the in-memory analysis, or any combination of those things. So this is a part of the portfolio where we've got some assistance with respect to data catalog. Okay, I think it's demo time. So You want to know what I'm talking about, right? Let me show you. All right, so what I'm going to do now is, previously I was showing you the desktop version of Spotfire. We call it the Analyst. And we also have a web version, which is the so-called business author. Both on the web and on the desktop, we have authoring capability. But on the web, we also have a consumer-style client that doesn't have the ability to edit the application. But more or less, we have a kind of cloud-first methodology. So all the new features that we release them to the web client first, and then we roll them back to the on-premises and desk clients later. So it's a really fully featured authoring client. There's only a couple of things you can't do on the web, like Iron Python scripting, because there's some potential security concerns, and advanced connections to local statistics engines. There's just a few capabilities that are different on the web versus on the desktop. So let me just show you. This is the same dashboard, the same analysis that we were looking at before. It's a dashboard and an analysis application, right? The marketing automation, kind of marketing and analytics application. So what I want to do now is, so this is our business author. It's running on the web. Hopefully the connection works well. What I'm going to do is take a look at some Excel data here. I'm going to just drag that onto the web page and upload that to my application. Now, I want you to notice that all of these tabs are still here. Here's the customer overview, KPIs, the RFM analysis, clustering, and so on. But now I have a new page in my analysis. I dragged a new data set in. It's now a separate asset within this application container, and I immediately begin my work. It draws a bar chart. I can do some stuff. Okay, so I just want to keep that in mind. There's now two data tables in my same application. So this is EBITDA data. It's financial kind of reporting data. And what I want to do, what I think I want to do, is do a sum of my dollar amount on the y-axis. Okay. I have to cop to something here. I injected some bad data into the system so that I could spot that problem and then go fix it. But in this latest version of Spotfire, it automatically fixed it for me. So I'm not going to be able to show you that error and then how I get around it, but I'm going to pretend that there was an error, and then we will fix it. So the issue that I was going to show you is that when I went to go and plot the sum of my dollar amount by business unit or by category or whatever, I was only going to get the option to do counting because there were some NA values embedded in that data. So this is what we call our data panel. So right alongside all of the data analysis that we're doing, we have descriptive statistics. What's the min, max, average, mean? I have unique, all the categories here, unique list of categories. And you'll notice that there are some empty values here. So this was previously an NA, and by some heuristic rules, we've hidden that NA and interpreted this as being an integer or a number rather. So now I don't have to do that step. I don't have to fix that step. But if I wanted to, I could have done so and then perhaps replaced empty values with a specific value. So now the null values I'll call 0 because this is a dollar amount. So now in this data table where there were formerly NAs that I didn't filter out yet, where that happened automatically, I've now substituted those nulls with zeros. Right? So now I'm doing that in the context of the analysis, and I'm moving forward here. What I'd like to do now, yes ma'am, Claudia, please.
It didn't even give you a warning though that said you had some data problems.
Yeah, and
That's a bit of a problem for me that you don't even know.
In this case, actually, we have some preferences where you can define what constitutes null values, and we have a kind of taxonomy there. You can put NA or none or null, or sometimes people use like -999.
Yeah.
So that's a preference that you can set and change. So in this case, the preference is set to identify n/a as a null value, and then kind of harmonize those. If you have data sets coming from different places, you might have one place where it says null and others say NA. So you're right, that happened kind of like invisibly, but you do have control over that behavior.
Yeah, it makes me
Can you
nervous.
turn it
when
off completely?
Yeah.
Yes, you can.
Okay,
Yeah.
that'll solve Claudia's problem.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to automatically fix it. Believe it or not, I do.
Okay.
I just,
But you want to keep
I
track
just
of
like
the
to
fact
see a
that that
little-
was there. Yeah, and so I mentioned
Yeah.
non-destructive type changes, and so we're keeping an image of that raw data, and all the changes that we make is a stacked pipeline that sits on top of that raw
So
data.
somebody can go back and
You
say,
can-
"Oh, geez, we got problems with this system."
You can go
'cause-
back and
okay.
you can go back and edit those transformations. All of those things that you would want to do are supported here. So now let's go on to like recommendations again, right? So I'm looking at EBITDA data, so I'm going to go ahead and click my recommendations, and I'm going to pick this new data table that we're looking at here, our EBITDA data table, and I'm going to pick dollar amount and say category of sale. So now the system is smart enough to know that for this kind of data, perhaps I might want to look at a waterfall chart, and that is, in fact, the selection that I want to choose. I double-click, and now I have a waterfall chart in my application. So now, what might I want to do next? And now I am used to organizing and rearranging the order of these bars to fit, this EBITDA analysis, because this is just all of my financial reporting. So some of these categories are in the EBITDA and some of them are not. So what I want to do first is reorganize them, and then I want to group them. So what I will do, reorganize them. So I want to go here to the data panel, and I want to pick my category list. And I want to, instead of using standard alpha sort order, I want to make a custom one. So I'm going to take my, what do I want to do? Sales, and move it all the way to the front. And then I'm going to take amortization, depreciation, financial costs. I'm not a finance guy, so I'm going to push these down to the bottom. And then I'm going to say OK. Now notice when I do that reordering, the visualization responds. I'm still doing my analysis. I spotted something I wanted to change. I make that tweak, and now I'm good to go. Now what I want to do next is to create the EBITDA category. So I'm going to visually mark these records on the screen all the way up to the tax item, which is excluded here. And then I'm going to right-click and group from marked records, call this EBITDA. If I spell it right, EBITDA. And now I have the total amount over here and the EBITDA amount, and then the rest of the categories. So I'll take the remainder here and make a new group, call that rest. I don't know if there's a technical term for that. And so now you see I just have 2 bars and a total. But I can add the original category back in. Where is it? Right there. And now I have my final EBITDA analysis that I wanted to see. So I fixed the data, I replaced some null values, I reorganized graphically, I grouped graphically, and now I have a hierarchy that's been defined here. And and let's say I'm done. There might be more things that I would want to do, but let's say we're done. Except the next quarter rolls around. And so now I want to add some new data in. So how do I do that? So I'm going to just take the simple way here, and I'm not going to show you connections to today. It's not really possible to get into all of the details, but let's do another drag and drop exercise. So I'm going to take now my next quarter's data. Actually, it says east and west, but let's pretend it's next quarter. I drag it onto my analysis, and now I get a different kind of behavior. So remember earlier when I dragged the first one on, I just got a new data table. Because the system is automatically inspecting, does the new data look like the old data? If it does not, don't bother the user and just bring in a new data table. If it looks similar, we're going to do a statistical ranking of how similar, and we're going to give you those choices. And now I can, and actually we're making a recommendation based on inferencing of the underlying data that says, hey, this kind of looks like the other data table called West. Would you like to merge this one with that one? And that's the default choice because maybe I want to do the other, but it's so similar that that's going to be listed as the top choice. And now I could just say, okay, so it's a one-click transaction, but let me just show you that if I wanted to change it, I could. And I want to point out here that The columns are not the same on these two data sets. So I have business unit, that's the same category, which is one of these interesting things that I'm charting. It's called something something in the other chart, right? I just mocked that up because I wanted it to be named something different. So we're not looking at the column names. We're looking at the data types, the frequencies of, doing kind of text analysis, text analytics here in order to generate a very simple, easy to use recommendation. And most of the time it's right. If it's not right, I can go and make a change here, and I have the opportunity to do that at any point. And by the way, it also automatically identifies which data was new and which data was old, in this case by the file name, but I can go and edit, if I want to change what I call those things. I have a lot of control over this process. So let me just say OK and OK. So again, it could have been one click. I showed you a few options there. And now I have this new variable called origin of data, which was created for me by the recommendation. I can drag this onto the chart, and now I have two different, I can look at a gallery of side-by-side EBITDA. Okay, pretty cool, right? So I'm doing the analysis, but at the same time I'm spotting errors, I'm fixing them, I'm going with the flow, So now I want to know, well, what the heck did I just do? I did a lot of stuff there, right? Let's figure out what that was. Now let me blow this up a little bit. So to do that, I can go over to my what we call source view. So here it's a kind of simple set of transformations, but here it is. I brought in my West region, or let's say first quarter data, and I did a few things to that. And then, so here's what's interesting. If I had transactions, transformations on this data table, I would see a little number like this. Right? It says 2 different transformations. And if you recall, we did those transformations on this table. But they don't show up here. Why? Because the system is smart enough to know that when I added and when I appended the new data to the old data, I probably want to do those same transformations to both of those tables. If I only did the transformation on the first one, I'd have to go and redo that work on the second one. So Spotfire is smart enough to slide those transformations forward so that now you can see the list of the tasks that we did here. We replaced the empty values, we added a binned column to create our EBITDA hierarchy, and here's that add rows capability. So we're recording the transactions that you take and intelligently organizing them, and in fact collapsing them. Like if you've looked at some of the data prep tools, oftentimes what you see is just a huge mess of boxes and lines on the screen, right? So we've taken, and we have a patent pending on this as well, that we've taken this concept of workflow and we're shrinking it down and putting the transactions that only apply to one final or interim product table and kind of nesting them inside automatically. Now most of those tools will let you draw a box and kind of shrink that down into a subflow, but it becomes very difficult to know what you have and what you don't have. So you can tell I'm kind of excited about this because this is unique in the industry, and not only is it unique from a data prep point of view, because I told you those data prep tools do one or the other of these techniques, but we also not only do both of those techniques, but we do it inside of the analytics application.
Well, I like that because now I don't, you don't have to remember how you got to where you got to.
Exactly right.
But go back to the side-by-side for a minute because, and I know this, we're talking about data wrangling now. But if you say, okay, well, look, between these two sets, we've got to change an EBITDA, okay? How do I account for that change in terms of how each of those components contributed to that change? Can you do that? So that may be.
I'm not sure I understand. I'm in the ballpark of what you're asking about.
Okay, so you had a change of 100, but you had 10 different things that differentiated getting to the change of 100.
Are you asking about editing?
How did each of those 10 things contribute to the change of 100?
Well, yeah, I could go and group further, or I could disaggregate these, and then, again, those transformations still, take place against that data. I'm not totally following your question, but if you're asking, can I edit?
It's a cause of change analysis.
Okay, cause of change analysis. Well, maybe we'll defer that a little bit because that's more of an analytical pursuit, I would say.
I know we're on data wrangling.
Yeah, so let's hold that, because we absolutely can do that sort of thing, but it's not sort of part of the, the shtick for the data wrangling part. So we'll come to that. So, but this demonstration is done. Just to review, though, I did this all in the web authoring environment. No desktop client required. I already had an analysis application up and in memory. I added new data. It automatically detected that that was different and let me start new with that. Did some fixes, did some tweaks, added a new data table. It inferenced, that that had a relationship there, automatically assigned, version of the different categories. I hit OK, and that creates a new variable automatically for me to distinguish between those two data sets, and I can immediately use that in the visualization. So it's extremely time-saving and powerful kind of, data is messy. Data is messy.